So hang
All
on.
right, I'm calling the meeting to order. Okay, Stephanie, will you do roll call?
Yep. Chairman Andrea Lewis,
Here.
Sharon Billings,
She's mute.
Sharon,
Sorry, I muted because my husband's vacuuming. I'm here.
thank you. Casey Collins,
Here.
Tim Loeb,
Here.
Linda Painter,
Yeah.
Liz Waters,
Here.
and Greg Yavalak. He's here. Hi, Greg, are you here? Hopefully Greg can hear us. All right. I think we can move forward. We do have quorum.
Okay, thanks, Stephanie. Are there any agenda changes?
Yes, I think we're going to take a little bit of time after the discussion items to talk about the walk, the invasives walk. Tim and Linda, whoever was on that walk, do you guys mind just, I know that you shared the notes. Okay, let's just add that under 6D. So as item 6E, we're going to talk about the invasive walk for just a few minutes.
All right, any other additions? Excuse me. Any other additions or changes to the agenda? Do I have a motion that we approve the agenda as presented with the changes?
I so approve.
Okay, Liz made the motion that we approve the changes. Second?
I second.
All right, any more discussion? All right, vote. All in favor of the agenda as presented with changes, say aye.
Aye.
Any noes? All right, Stephanie, all voted yes. All right, next on the agenda is the minutes from the August 18th meeting. I hope everyone had a chance to read them and review them. Any discussion about the minutes? Any changes?
None.
All right, is there a motion we approve the minutes as presented?
I move we approve the minutes as presented.
Tim Loeb made the motion. We approve the minutes. A second.
I'll second.
Okay, that's Linda. Linda has seconded. Any discussion? All right, call the vote. All in favor of accepting the minutes as presented, say aye.
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 Aye. Noes? Minutes are approved. All right, next are the presentation, and I will turn it over to you, Stephanie.
Yeah, we are joined today by Will Spoon, who is like an honorary tree board member at this point. Will is a member of the Historic District Commission and lives in downtown Hillsborough, has a lot of background in trees and conservation. And so he, from time to time, helps me out and has some really good ideas for projects moving forward. So Will put together a presentation which you received in your agenda packets last month, and then we actually tabled the item and I sent it out to you again. Hopefully you guys have had a chance to look at it, but Will is here tonight to just, or today, excuse me, not today. To just kind of go through it and share some thoughts and ideas with you guys. So Will, do you want me to share the screen or do you want to share the screen?
I can share. I've got the presentation pulled up that I sent you.
All right, it's all yours.
Cool deal. Yeah, so hey everybody, good to talk to you again, and sorry for missing last month. All jokes aside, my mother-in-law literally fell down the stairs and broke her arm that morning, so I needed a pass. But she's doing good now. Yeah, so this is kind of a follow-on to something I showed some of you all 3 months ago, which was the iTree survey. And you kind of gave me some homework, like where could we go with this next? And so this is partly answering that and partly some related to some discussions that Stephanie and I had. But so the idea around this is how we can best grow the canopy in Hillsborough, the tree canopy. And so I tried to be guided by some type of process, and the things that made sense to me and what seemed kind of like standards in this field were to have some reasons why you could point back to why you selected certain areas. And the ones that made sense to me and make sense to a lot of other folks were you try to get canopy over underserved communities, more equitable way. You'll
I could have sworn
it was just a big Nat Geo article recently about how different you can see just in one city, like in LA, you can see like the rich areas have a lot of trees, poor areas don't. It's pretty clear. And so that's an important one. Contribution to urban heat. So where can you put trees that will do the most good?
Sorry, but I'm sorry. Can everyone mute themselves? I think Greg, we may be hearing you now, but if everyone can mute, so that Will can talk. Thanks.
Okay.
And so the idea here is that you're not just reducing heat in the one place shaded by the tree, like a big parking lot. That's the heat that's created there from that asphalt roasted in the sun drifts down all over town or rises up all over town to different places. So the idea was, where can we put some trees that would most likely have a good impact in the immediate area, but also to larger areas. One thing I looked at was the largest public benefit. So, like I wouldn't suggest some in a golf course somewhere where most people don't go. I'd suggest one that gets a lot of traffic, where a largest number of the public come through, a diverse crowd, if we could get that. One thing I looked at, and this is still in development, was potential areas for public-private collaboration. So, as Stephanie said, you all have stuck trees just about on every little bit of Hillsborough town land that you can find. And so the idea here was, where could we do a project that would start off on town or county land, but then could potentially go into private property and partnering with someone when, again, disclaimer, we don't have the mechanisms in place to make this happen, but the sites that were chosen had an eye towards that possibly becoming a possibility in the future. Obviously look for minimal utility presence, because you don't want to plant trees where you're just gonna have to top them to keep underneath the power lines, or where the roots could cause problems with underground utilities. And I also just checked out, after I did my satellite snooping, I checked out these areas to make sure there weren't already some plantings, because a lot of these newer developments around town, it doesn't look like much from the air, from the satellite, and they might have ranked as no tree present on the iTree survey, but they could have a nice 3, 4, 5-year-old tree already planted. So like, we don't want to suggest to plant trees where there's already some small trees that will create canopy eventually anyway. Tools that I used were Orange County GIS, USDA's iTree Canopy, which I showed you the presentation in the lower right previously. And with this one, with this particular thing I'm showing you now, I got into iTree Landscape, which incorporates and allows access to Landsat 8 thermal infrared sensor data. So these are satellite. Landsat passes over, I use this at my day job, but they pass over like every 5 to 6 days in this area and shoot infrared. Basically, it can tell you how hot it is on the ground. And that is upper right. You'll see kind of the map with the red blotches. Those are heat areas, and or overheated areas. I'll get into this more in the next slide. Beating the heat. So all the areas that we looked at, and to the right is kind of a blow up. And you see like over, not to call out Hillsborough barbecue. I mean, they do roast meat all day and it smells delicious, but there's just to use this as an example, there's a red blotch over that. And so that red blotch, if you look to the left, means that area, so this includes that whole corner, so some of this heat's coming from those rooftops of that business district. A lot of it's coming from the parking lot across the street. It's kind of a treeless area. And so that that area is ranking out as anywhere from 3 to 14 degrees Fahrenheit over the surrounding areas. So big difference. And all the ones I'm about to show you, so I got the Landsat temps, and I went around and verified these these temperatures through on-site readings using industry standards, and I'll get into that in a second. So here's the areas I checked out. Like I said, the first one was the Hillsborough Barbecue, Nash Street Tavern, West Hillsborough parking lot area. Another one was if you go out Eno Street west, First Community Baptist Church. It's the big church that sits up on the corner there in West Hillsborough. Then I went to Mount Bright Baptist Church, which is north and down in historic Hillsborough, so kind of like Orange Street, I think. And then I went to the Orange County Recreation Center, which is kind of smack in the middle of town. You're probably all familiar with that. And so just to start off with the West Hillsborough parking lot, this is about a 4 acres of land on 2 tracks. If you've gotten ice cream or barbecue or drank over here, there's a ton of people that come through here. So of all types of people come in from the county, people from town use this area. A lot of folks pass through here, and this parking lot stays full most times of the day when the businesses are open. It's mostly easily planted, so I'll jump into, I don't know if I have a pointer here. Can you see my little hand moving around, Stephanie? The cursor hand, can you see that?
Yes, we see it.
Okay, cool. So I'll use this to highlight the areas I thought could work for planting. The overhead's easier to see. And, you know, I didn't actually verify any of this with the town other than send it to Stephanie. So there may be something going here that I don't realize, but the yellow orangish box is owned by the railroad, and we have contacts with them, and they're, I don't know, this railroad companies aren't always the easiest to deal with, but these, in my dealings with them, they've been fairly responsive on other things. So we have a known partner, and they've also, I assume the town had to work with them to put in the river walk. So we probably have some experience with them there, but again, I wasn't involved in that. But so that's the orange box.
And let me jump in too. So the parking lot is leased by Scott Pasley and Matt Fox, who own the West End Group. They have a long-term lease with the railroad, and I did reach out to them just this past month about planting along these areas that you've identified, Will, and they thought that it would work with their lease, but they were going to check and make sure. So just so you know, I'm trying to find out if this is an actual feasible spot, and it looks like it may be.
Oh, great. And I'd heard about that lease just through other people, but I just went with whoever the property owner was in the tax record, and that leases aren't reflected anywhere that I see, but it's good that you're already talking to them, so that's awesome. But yeah, so like she said, this would be a pretty simple one. In this blue box up here, this is sidewalk that I guess town owns. It's just outside of the easements. I think this is in the, I'm probably using terms wrong, but this is, I think the town owns the sidewalk, and the grass strip on either side, it's kind of tight for root plantings, but you all know that type of work better than me. Looks like you could plant trees either on the parking lot side of that sidewalk, probably there. I think the strip in between the road and the sidewalk might be too small. And you could get several in here down along Nash as well as along Calvin. And, you know, depending on where the conversations with the leaseholders and or the railroad goes, this is where I thought there's good opportunity for a public-private partnership, because this whole lot could be planted. And, you know, you could pick something that its roots do well with cars around them. There's, you know, different trees that can handle that pretty good. And you could really eliminate a lot of heat by doing these stretches along the roads, and or hopefully potentially one day doing more of this lot. And yeah, so that is one possibility I found, and I'll get to it at the end, but there's a canopy modeling software that's part of this USDA thing. And I use it some, and you could even enter in different types of trees to see what they're going to look like 1 to 50 years. And the little green circle looked exactly the same for every kind of tree I picked. So I'm not sure how refined that tool is, but I'd say, 4 trees down each leg of 4 trees down Calvin, 4 trees down Nash. And depending on how you source them and where you get them, a 3-year-old tree might be $150. So you're probably under $1,000 to plant this for the initial planting. But again, I don't know where you get your trees, what age you buy them at, that kind of thing. Jump on to the next one. So disclaimer with this, I haven't talked to anybody with either of these churches about this. I don't even know if trees along this is desirable. It may be that people like the curb appeal of the church being clearly visible from the road. I haven't gone to these churches personally, so I'm not sure what the feelings are. I just identified it as an area from satellite snooping that looked like it could use some trees.
Yeah, and let me just jump in again real quick. On the top photo, we actually have trees that were just planted there in the last maybe 2 years ago. They're crepe myrtles. So they're not really canopy trees. And the reason the tree board used crepe myrtles there was because of the overhead power lines, having to stay under those overhead power lines. But we do have just 2 trees that have been planted there in the right of way.
Okay, here on this longer side, not
It's on the Eno. It's on the Eno Street side.
Are those your trees also down the hill outside of the
Yes.
Red Hat? Okay.
Yeah, the oak trees we planted last year. Eno Street has been a focus of the tree board for the last couple of years, but it's really difficult because the south side of the road is in the North Carolina Railroad corridor and they won't allow any tree plantings. We've tried and that is not allowed. So on the north side of the road, we're competing with utility lines and underground utilities. But there are 5 trees that have been planted in that block in the last couple of years by the tree board.
Okay, great. Like you said, this one wasn't ideal because of the power lines, but the goal here was to do some equity planting, which sounds like is already on your radar if you're moving out, and also I like this one because if we could go to public-private partnerships, this field behind the church, I thought could do well with planting. There's like 1 magnolia out there, but not much else. And I know it's more difficult, more expensive, but the parking lot around the church doesn't have planter boxes in it. And so if you could ever get to doing stuff on private property, you could cut in some through the asphalt, cut in some planter boxes and do some trees to shade this parking lot some. But that's a discussion for another day. Mount Bright Baptist. I like this one a lot. I have talked to this pastor about some other things, and they're definitely pretty forward-thinking folks and civic-minded, so they would probably like to see this. But again, I'm not positive. Maybe like the curb appeal of the unobstructed view of the church, we'd have to have that specific discussion. But this whole stretch along Union, this is all owned by one property owner. This big long blue rectangle. Not a power line over it. It looks like a pretty easy place to plant to me. And if you wanted to get into the public-private thing, again, they actually already have planter boxes cut in. And I think trees are important to this group because there's actually plaques on each of these planter boxes saying who donated this crepe myrtle. And so I thought, it'd be possible to approach them about putting canopy trees in those same planter boxes, which would do. This is about an acre's worth of asphalt. This is a lot of unshaded asphalt that causes a lot of heat in this area. And I would really like to see that get dealt with. But I think a low-hanging fruit is the long rectangle along Union Street. And that one is town land as far as I can tell. So the GIS where they put these little yellow boxes, that's not like a surveyor's mark. So it could be give or take a few feet close to the road or farther from the road, but we could get into those details later. And again, this is almost a full block. So I'd say maybe $1,000. You could plant this whole thing with canopy trees, depending on where you get them from.
Hey, Will, quick question. I was up there recently on my bike, and I noticed, so the further reach of this rectangle, if I'm not mistaken, there's some kind of sidewalk with a median. It seems like right in front of the church, there's.
Yeah, you're right. It's kind of covered up by the red and the blue line right here, but directly in front of the church here, between the two parking lots, there is a sidewalk. But I bet it's 8 to 10 feet between the sidewalk and the roads. So again, I think that's still plenty of room to plant in. But yeah, you're right. There is a sidewalk there, and so this group may potentially have concerns about about that sidewalk getting cracked by roots or something. So we'd need to be prepared to speak to that. Jump on to the next one if there weren't any other questions. Oh, and so one other thing, Stephanie, I haven't seen much that led me to think there's been tree board plantings up this way yet, but you probably know better.
No, you're correct. You're correct. This is, I think the closest plantings to this are on Churton Street.
Okay.
So this is a neighborhood that hasn't been planted, and I think primarily it has to do with the fact that property owners tend to sort of claim the spaces in front of their buildings as their own. They're the ones mowing and maintaining. And so the tree board in the past has generally looked for areas that were between the sidewalk and the right of way, which are maintained by the town, so Churton and King Street. But we could certainly, if this was an area that the tree board wanted to discuss for plantings, we could certainly reach out to the church. I think what you were explaining before, like outreach is really important to make sure that there's buy-in into the project. But that's something we could do.
Totally, and I've talked with this pastor a fair amount. He came on 3 years ago, so he's kind of newer to the group, Dewey Williams, but he's got a board of alders that have been at the church their whole lives. So he kind of looks back to these these folks that have been around a lot longer to get the feel for the community's opinions on that kind of thing. And kind of breeze by it, but if you want equity, Union and North, this is traditionally an area where a lot of Black folks live, and so if that's important, this is an area where that could be done. Last one is Orange County Rec Center, and you all did do some plantings here. You got 4 trees in to replace this big sycamore that got taken down a while back. High public use and benefit. There's everything from summer camps to there's a dentist and doctor's office in here for people that need that. There's parks, playgrounds, a ton of people come through here from in town as well as out in the county. It's definitely probably looked at it more, but we started planting trees below this driveway and downhill, but then as you come uphill, there's no power lines there, and the drainage, the sewers on the other side as well. So I think, you could continue coming up the hill here and stay clear of utilities. County owns it, so as easy of a partner as they are, there's that. But the town has the contacts and knows all these players, and there's public easement as far as I can tell. And I also heard that, so we lost this was on the treasured tree program, the sycamore. I heard that some of these others are going to come out as well as part of some are coming out, some are going in. The county's planting a row of trees, kind of, if you follow my cursor down to this parking lot behind this cypress glen. They're planting, as part of another project, they're planting a whole row of trees along here, but nothing planned for going up the hill or around. So you have to do some deconfliction with them, but I think this is unclaimed territory. And so as far as equity, the people that, the rich people send their kids to the fancy camps down at UNC, but just working class people this is where they send their kids to go to camp, to go to soccer camp, football camp, just day regular summer camp. So you get a lot of equitable use out of putting trees here. And full disclaimer, I live a block away, so I'd love it too. Possible next steps. So we already talked about some of these planning permissions. This is the tree placement software I described. It's supposed to model the canopies. Like I said, it's like what you put in is pretty detailed, but what you get out, I didn't see much difference in, you know, how big of a tree you started with or what type of tree, but I did it kind of quickly. But this is here if you wanted to model out some different types of trees when you choose them. I'd be happy to do that as a follow-up. Funding, I went down that road and found some potential grants, but there's sensitivity with, or not sensitivity, there's a process with the town about going for grants because it needs to be orchestrated at a higher level to make sure we're doing what's in line with the town's growth plans, because there's matches for a lot of these. So Stephanie's got all the information on that, and a next step could be to get a presentation from one of these possible funding partners with USDA. We have some contacts there, or you could skip that step and just fund them yourself and then plan the planting in different areas. Like I know the rec center one, you get some community interest in doing like a community planting day. We'd help, and some other families in the area would like to be happy to come out and make a day of it. The church folks may be interested in doing a service day. I haven't talked to them about that, but it's possible. And maybe we get the bar crowd to come over from Nash Street and plant the parking lot. So you usually find someone that wants to help out. But that's the end of it. And take any questions or go back to any slides you wanted to revisit.
I don't know how I'm meant to ask questions. Like, can I just say, can I ask a question? Sorry, I know there's lots of protocols I don't really understand. It's my second meeting. So, hi, Will. I was wondering, like, of the 4 areas that you showed us, how did you choose where to, I mean, apart from the heat map, it seems like there are lots of other areas with similar heat profiles. How did you choose these, and where else would you have looked if you had had 100 hours?
Yeah, so the way I chose those was outside of the heat maps. The big thing is just where the town has property, which makes it a lot easier, and areas I was familiar with. So the pink box is the town limits, and I always get the exact definition of, there's different types of town limits, but so, you know, a lot of it honestly was in the downtown. So you see, or in the historic part. I didn't really mess with the Walmart area that much because it's, you know, the public-private thing was kind of nascent at this point. So I wasn't sure how much time to invest in that. A lot of these new developments around the sportsplex fall into that category of already have trees planted. So, you know, I wasn't just trying to be a town rat. I did drive out to check out some of the developments, and almost to a house, they've got, you know, a young maple, a young oak in the front yard. So I think those areas are going to grow on their own. And Stephanie knows the plans better for Collins Ridge, but I'm assuming trees will go in there too. So yeah, that's the basic way I chose it, was heat, where there weren't already trees planted and where we had easy access to town property. You jump right back to the criteria to make sure I didn't miss anything.
Yeah, just so everyone understands, the town has a tree preservation ordinance. So the tree board, again, y'all's authority is really town trees, which are trees in the right of way, and trees at town facilities. Now, that doesn't mean you can't start some type of public-private partnership project where you fund or help distribute trees on private property, but your authority is really limited to public property. But our tree preservation ordinance, which is a part of our unified development ordinance, is a regulatory tool that the town uses to make sure that new developments conserve a portion of existing tree canopy and also provide new plantings. So like Will was explaining, in Forest Ridge, Beckett's Ridge, Waterstone, Corbinton Commons, these large developments that we've had in the last, couple decades, they've all had requirements to retain certain percentage of canopy and also plant street trees and a percentage of new trees on private property as a part of their development approval. Now, those trees, if you go through Beckett's Ridge, you can really see how after 15, 20 years, those trees are really maturing. Whereas if you drive through some of the newer neighborhoods, they still, in Waterstone, for instance, it still seems really open and hot, which is why it's showing as red in this heat index, but you actually can't find very many places to add plantings because they've already been planted, they just haven't had time to mature yet. So anyway, if that helps, just know that we do have that regulatory tool right now, and it is something that that helps us make sure that new developments and developers continue to help with things like the overall canopy and heat index in town.
And Stephanie, you were saying a couple of weeks ago when you met us for our orientation that might get voted down by the state. Did that happen? Or
they're trying in Raleigh. I don't, so there's a part of the budget right now that is trying to repeal tree preservation ordinances unless a municipality has been granted special legislation to have a tree preservation ordinance, which if it passes, ours would fall in that category of being repealed unless we could get special legislation. I feel fairly confident that we would seek special legislation in order to have a tree preservation ordinance, but then again, I don't know how long that might take. So yeah, there are some threats. The local governments are only allowed to do what the state government gives us permission to do. And that is something right now that is controversial. Trees are controversial, apparently.
thank you.
So I have a question, I guess, for the whole board. I think this is really an excellent presentation. I really appreciate, what Will has done and all the information here. And I like all of the spots that he's picked out. Should we select one out of the 4 and try to implement? Is that where we're going to go with this?
Well, so what we're going to do a little later in the agenda today under item 6A is we're going to continue to talk about our plantings for this year. And so I would just ask that you guys remember these sites. And as we're prioritizing planting areas for this year, and maybe even talking about future planting areas, we can talk about these sites. But we do have a pretty long agenda. So I would suggest that if you guys have any questions for Will, particularly about the information, let's go ahead and get those on the record. And otherwise we can move on and then just incorporate this information in our conversations about future plantings.
Any other questions for Will?
I would just like continuing with my question, like how did you choose the sites? Would be like, I mean, maybe this is a discussion for outside. Maybe could we explore the other areas that you were thinking you might want to look at? I'm particularly interested in Fairview. I know the community center and the police station area, for example, or in West Hillsborough. I feel like, I mean, walking through there, that there are some heat spots, and those are areas where we might want to consider equity outside of the kind of downtown and environs area. So I was just wondering, were there other spots that you wish you had time to go to? Or is this something that we can discuss anon?
Yeah, I'm happy to do the same thing for other areas. But I mean, I figured I'd gave you 2 or 3 times what you'd be able to fund this year. So I kind of stopped it at 4 sites.
Okay.
And I was riding my bike for most of it, walking my kid in the stroller. So
yeah.
limited to where I went. But yeah, if you got other areas that you want me to check out, just let me know.
I'll come with you. I'll ride your bike for you.
There you go. That works.
Great, thank you.
Of course. Oh, I had one other piece of homework. You all asked me last time to make a canopy recommendation, and easier said than done. That requires a more involved analysis of the type of cover we have, the open areas, and there's grants that you can do to do that next step, and the kind of the general guidance is for this type of area 40 to 60% coverage, which we're right in there. So I think it was 55, 57% coverage, but you could always do better, and probably need to if things are going to be easier in the future. So yeah, if you want the exact percentage number for our exact municipal footprint, that'll cost you, and USDA does that for like $1,500 or something. So that's something you could look at if you really wanted it, or you could just stick trees wherever you can and hope for the best.
I just wanted to say thank you for doing this. It's very interesting. And I also think that, like, even if we took a couple of sites that were in town and accessible visually, like if we did endeavor into this like public-private partnership piece, I think it's really interesting that we could have like examples. So if we were to sort of point to either the parking lot or the church or whatever and say like, this is where we had this sort of relationship and brought these trees in and took care of the labor and everything, like even aesthetically, people could see what it can do to their property. So I think that sort of local, like, concentrated in town is, at least to start, might just be a good place to kind of jump off personally.
That's a great point that I didn't include in the selection criteria, but if you wanted to have like a education component where the most people would learn what seems like pretty common knowledge, like, oh, it's less hot under a tree, but if you could even have like a little education placard, like, see these trees, we dropped the temperature here by 6 degrees. Like if you did that either at the rec center or at the Hillsborough parking lot, then you could say, well, then we've taught people, hey, go home and plant trees at your house. So it could kind of be a force multiplier.
Yeah, like taking all this information and kind of making it like easy to kind of absorb with like examples in town, I think is an interesting idea.
Any other questions for Will? Well, thank you, Will, for your presentation. It's been very informative, and we have lots to think about and to prioritize. And we're ready to move on to the next part of the agenda, which is the action item, Tom Magnuson, Historical Museum.
Thank you, Will.
Of course, thank you. See you later.
Okay, Steph, you want to talk to that?
Yeah, I don't see Tom Magnuson on the call. So I don't know, perhaps he couldn't join us for some reason or another. And I think that that's fine. This is a little unique. So for new members, when someone wants to plant or remove a tree in the right of way or on town property, they have to get tree board approval. This is not an application to remove, it's an application to prune, which doesn't generally happen. We don't really let people other than the town and town's contractors prune trees, usually. But in this is a little bit of a unique situation because the property that Orange County Museum is in is owned by the town. The stone, historic building is owned by the town, but it is leased by the museum, and the museum is responsible for the maintenance of the site with a contribution, an annual contribution from the town to cover maintenance expenses. So it's a little bit of a unique situation. So what's happening is the museum has a new roof, and the I believe it's willow oaks that are out in front along the Churton Street right of way, and the one that is immediately adjacent to the museum on town property have some low-hanging branches that the museum feels are too close to the roof. And so they are asking for permission to prune those branches back from the roof. It doesn't seem like significant pruning. And I sent you their narrative and a photo and a site plan and sort of their rationale for the project. But because it's such a unique situation, because pruning can sometimes be problematic for trees, I thought it would be better for the tree board to just discuss this and make a decision as to whether or not this pruning can be allowed by the museum. They would use a certified contractor. I think all of that information is in your packet, so no worries there, but really more a matter of, is this pruning acceptable? And if yes, let's just get it on the record.
Stephanie, I have a question. It seemed as I was driving by that area yesterday, I noticed a dead tree. I don't know if it's on the museum property area or.
Yeah, the dead tree is in, right, that's a little further up the street. It's in the NCDOT right of way, and NCDOT is scheduling its removal. It will have traffic impacts because Churton Street will have to be closed for the removal. So they are working with the Public Works Department to put in place a traffic management and detour plan before that tree can be removed. That is outside of the area that we're talking about today.
Okay, thanks.
Discussion, questions for Stephanie about this?
Yeah, this is Greg. I don't see any problem with it as long as it's, properly done pruning.
Any others? Any other comments?
We hired a contractor to do, does he know who's going to do it?
Yes, they met with a certified arborist and contractor who will be climbing to do the work because there's really no place to set equipment.
Right.
I can't remember which contractor it was. It may have been Davey. I'm not sure, but it was
I don't think it's
confident. Okay. Yeah, and I didn't bring up this topic because I think it's controversial. I just think that we need an official motion on it since it's a unique situation and the trees are on a town facility, but it's not the town doing the work.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
I'm sorry, it doesn't change liability in any way. We're just rubber stamping, really. Does that sound right, Stephanie?
I mean, if anyone had any concerns about this pruning, then this would be the time to bring it up. But I do think we can, if this work is acceptable to the tree board, we can accomplish it in a way that is safe for the public and safe for the trees.
And it doesn't change your liability, except that would be on the state road, right? Churton's the state road.
Yeah, we're not going to have to close the road for this. Little pruning they're really talking about just some lower branches that overhang the roof. It won't, this won't impact the roadway but that other tree, that one's going to be a problem, but it's DOT's problem, not ours.
Get that right. I don't see anything wrong with it.
Well, do we have a motion?
I move that we approve the pruning of the trees by the historical building.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, Greg seconded. Any discussion? I'll call the vote. All in favor, aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Okay, go for it, Steph.
Thank you.
Okay, discussion items, the biggie. Fiscal year 22 plantings and Arbor Day.
Yep. Okay. So you guys will remember last month there were a couple of spots we talked about, and I did a little bit of follow-up. So just to run through them again, they're in the minutes, but just to remind you, we talked about, of course, new plants in the planters downtown. We do that every year. We're going to replace those hydrangeas that had to come out on West King Street. We talked about the options for plantings at Hillsborough Heights Pollinator Garden, which the beds have been prepared now. They're just ready to receive pollinator plants. So that is really more shrubs and perennials than it is trees. And then the other sites that were mentioned were possibly a planting on Riverwalk, which we can now water because of the cart, possibly Nash Street, which was in Will's presentation. And so I reached out to the Matt Fox, who leases the parking lot from North Carolina Railroad, and he said he was open to the idea of planting along Nash Street. That is a tricky spot because it is not in the public right of way. That's good for one reason, because it's a state road. And if the plantings were in the public right of way, we would have to follow NCDOT's planting guidelines, which essentially means small non-canopy trees. Outside of the public right of way, you can do larger trees, but then they're on private property. And that's not something that this board has really done before. We have planted on Orange County property before, but that's still public property. So if you guys are really interested in that site, we might just need to work through whatever kind of agreements would need to be in place for ongoing maintenance and care of any trees planted on that private property. We'd have to work through that with, obviously, Scott and Matt. And then, there were a couple other sites that we mentioned. Of course, Cates Creek Park can still have additional plantings. We talked about the roundabout on Cates Creek Parkway being somewhere that we might want to plant eventually. And one spot that I noticed that we didn't talk about yet was the entrance into Gold Park. There's an island that's just grass, and it's a fairly large island. That might be a spot that we could add a tree as well. So really what I need you guys to do today is to just let me know like what your priorities are for this list of plantings. And then the way that this works is I meet with contractors and get estimates and try to accomplish as much as I can for the budget we have. And we do have about $5,600, so that goes pretty far. The last couple years, if you remember our discussion last month, we have been focused really on pollinator plants and pollinator gardens as a part of our Bee City initiative. Although we did get some trees in the ground last year along Eno. And it's funny, the trees that we planted in the last couple of years were in the spots that Will brought up. So along the Orange County Whitted building, we planted 4 trees. And then on Eno Street, we've planted 5 trees in the last couple of years. So I think that just goes to show that this board, even though you may not have been thinking about heat index, you guys were responding to areas of town that, obviously needed additional planting. So kudos. So yeah, I'll stop talking there, but I just really need you guys to kind of come together and figure out if you have specific priorities. And one of the things I'd like you to discuss is at least one Arbor Day planting, which we could do in November. That's usually when this town celebrates Arbor Day is in November, and we do the planting at the beginning of that sort of November to March dormant season. But that's something that I need to act on fairly quickly and is a part of our Tree City status for the year.
Stephanie, just a couple of questions about budget. So 2 questions. One, could you give us an estimate of what the pollinator plantings would cost at Hillsborough Heights Park? And then secondly, roughly speaking, how many trees, what are we talking, what's the price tag per tree for labor and installation as well as the tree itself?
It kind of depends. And the reason it depends is I think Will was right in explaining that you can usually get a pretty nice 1.5 inch caliper tree for a couple $100, but depending on where we pick, sometimes we also need fencing because of deer. And so that changes the price, not significantly, but anyway, sometimes we need soil amendments, sometimes we need, additional work from Public Works to ready a site.
Yeah.
But we can do a lot for $5,600. We can plant. Casey has been very helpful in the past, helping me put together plant orders from wholesale nurseries, which save us a lot of money, right? Because we are paying wholesale prices. So if you guys have, several sites, generally what happens is I usually work, and Casey sort of helps indicate what plants she thinks would be great in those gardens. And then we get as many as we can, and we just add to them over the years. And a lot of these, the native pollinator plants are spreading plants anyway. So when you first plant, it doesn't take as much as you think, because they tend to, propagate.
Well, I'd like to start with the Riverwalk, and I had 2 or 3 spots that I saw possibilities for. So I know we did plant, I think it was a sourwood across from the pollinator garden maintained by the master gardeners. And that does seem pretty bare. And I'm not sure about flooding, if that was the problem with the sourwood, but that's one idea. And then on the other side of Gold Park, across from that stand of bamboo on the other side of the sidewalk, like up above the retention basin, it's a pretty wide area without any trees. And finally, at the bridge over the right near Weaver Street Market, recently there was a large tree that fell at the western entrance to it. It's the west end of the bridge, and it's pretty. I noticed this morning there's a lot of sun hitting it, which is only going to probably invite invasives, but I see potential there for putting a really nice tree. Thinking like the side might be too big, but it is low lying, and it's a pretty wet environment. So anyway, that was just my thoughts about the Riverwalk.
I feel like, I know it's a little bit complicated with respect to ownership and everything, but I feel like that Nash Street parking strip is a really good place to plant. Number one, because it's so noticeably bare and hot. So like if you were to put a line of trees in there, everyone would notice. And I think if there was any kind of communication about it was a public-private partnership, like setting that as a precedent would also be interesting and kind of open the door to like other relationships that could come from that. Because we are planting in the right of way and we're doing that a lot. But I think if we could sort of move into this public-private kind of dynamic, then that there's a lot more opportunity there. And I mean, I do think that site would require a lot of amendment, and it would be a little more expensive to get those trees going, but I think it would make a really big impact, and it's very noticeable. And I mean, that's like a, commercial kind of section of town. So like, however nice Churton Street is walking up and down, I think sort of adding a little bit more to that Nash Street corridor would be really valuable.
Yeah, I agree with Casey. Every time we're there, it's just the barrenness of it kind of strikes you. So if we could do even a few trees along there, I think that would be a significant improvement.
I totally agree too. I think that would be a wonderful project, and also to maybe put up one of those information signs. I don't know what they cost, but you could have information on benefits of trees there. We always stop and read those signs. They're very informative.
Those signs cost more than all of our plantings per year. But that doesn't, they're so expensive. They are so expensive, really, thousands of dollars. But that doesn't mean that there isn't a good place in town to do an informational sign about the benefits of trees. However, there is another committee that deals with interpretive signage, and they have sort of a list of signs that they're developing and funding. However, in the meantime, we could do something that was more, temporary, get a sign or a plaque that just kind of gives a little overview that isn't a full interpretive sign, but still conveys the information that you're talking about. I think that is a very visible spot. I will say that in Will's presentation, he noted that there's an area that can be planted on Calvin Street there. And I just want to let you guys know that is not a possibility. This board has explored that spot at least twice. And there's underground and overhead utilities along that area that preclude any type of planting. So the only spot that might work is along South Nash Street outside of the right of way on the North Carolina Railroad property. And I just also need to find out, when you guys say public-private partnership, do you mean that the cost of the project should be shared? Or in your mind, is a public-private partnership the town or tree board funding the project and the private property owners allowing the project? So if I guess I kind of need to know if you expect a financial contribution from the private property owners, because that's something that I would need to know going into any type of negotiation.
I don't
No. Oh,
private property owners. Like if we had a budget for it and we wanted to like use the land, that's my interpretation of
Okay, helpful.
Hey, but if they want to pay,
yeah, right. I think
But
we
it's
just
not-
want to get their permission.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't your choice of that site isn't contingent upon them financially contributing
no.
to the project. Okay, thank you.
No.
complicate it and make everything.
Exactly.
I think another site that Will brought out is Mount Bright, because that would be reaching out to minority community. And it is a rather stark area. So I vote that we consider Mount Bright plantings.
How about if I was hoping to do this in the past month, so I apologize. I haven't had a chance to reach out to the pastor and the board there, but I can certainly do that over the next month to find out if it's something they're interested in. We might not be able to pull off that this year, because it sounds to me like if we pick a spot on Riverwalk, the Nash Street trees, and we intend to provide plants for the pollinator garden at Hillsborough Heights, that's probably about what our budget can take. But I think it would be good to go ahead and find out if the Mount Bright church community is interested in planting that site, because then that would give us the information we need for future plantings. Does that sound okay with you guys?
and
Okay.
you need help from us too.
Yeah.
Like,
I'm sorry.
do you need help from us, in those relationships? If you're talking to a board, like what can we do to help out with those future ideas as well as the current ones?
Well, usually the way it works is I shoot an email to find out if there's any interest, and then if they want to talk more, I could certainly attend a meeting and a tree board member could come along, but usually it's taken care of in email. So I'm not worried about that. And if they come back with a hard, fast no, and then the tree board wanted to approach them with reasons why they may want to reconsider, that is something that would be better. That outreach would be better done by the tree board instead of staff. The other thing, Linda, you had brought up Fairview, and I just want this board some of the members of this board may remember, but years ago, there was an attempt to do some tree plantings in the Fairview community. And at that time, it wasn't encouraged or well received by the community. I don't know exactly which streets it was or who was involved, because it was before I was staffing this board. But I do think there are probably some potentials for plantings. Now that the old police station is a community center, I know for sure that there's a group that is working on planting and stormwater control measures for that facility. And I think that we'll be working in close coordination with that group over the next couple of years, but there may also be some right-of-way plantings that we could do. My advice would be to sort of defer to the community groups, Fairview Community Watch, or even attend like a Fairview Live event. Maybe this board could conduct a survey about trees in the community to see what kind of support there is for that. Just because, whenever you do a planting that is going to land in front of someone's house, you want to make sure that it's something that people, want. Otherwise you get a controversial project. So
It's not like
yeah.
needs to be something that people are bought into, even if.
Exactly.
But I do feel quite strongly that we should be spending town money up there.
Yeah, and I do think that this would be a good time. I have relationships now with the Fairview Community Watch Group, and they are like doing a lot of work in the community. So I think this year would be a good time to reach back out and find out if there's any interest or support for future tree planting up there. And Linda, if that's something that you want to work with me on, then I would greatly appreciate the help.
Stephanie, I have a question about the planters and the pollinator garden. Who actually plants that and takes care of it?
Mostly me. And you'll notice that they're not looking great right now. So it's just been a busy
Where are they
time.
located exactly? I'm not, because there's planters all downtown. I don't know who does what.
Yeah, so the planters on West King Street and at the police station are town maintained. The gardens and the parking lots are town maintained. We provided planters at the visitor center and the museum. Those are actually maintained by those groups, but the planters belong to the town. We provided the planter, they do the plantings. All of the little planters that are outside of people's like door fronts and stores or around sidewalk dining areas, those are privately owned. The ones I'm talking about are the giant concrete planters that all match and are consistent. Those are the ones that are owned by the town and planted by Public Space Division. We have a couple of garden club volunteers who have helped, from time to time over the years. And then all of the plant beds at the police station, the Bank of America parking lot, and the Mayo parking lot are all maintained by Public Space.
So we don't do the actual work for any of them? We don't.
No, but if you want to volunteer, I can always, it's really up to people to just reach out to me if they want to help. I've always got jobs that need to be done, and I'm happy to take any volunteers and help with pruning and watering and planting. Yes.
Other comments? Discussion?
I have a question. So for Arbor Day, do you guys want to pick the site on Riverwalk, one of the sites on Riverwalk? It's town owned, so it makes it a little easier to move forward quickly.
What about that Gold Park
I think-
Island?
That island, yes.
Yeah, that is like super, super stark. I can bring it up really quick on Google to show it to you guys.
Yeah, I agree. The island sounds like a higher priority.
Hang on a second.
It also would be a good time to do some educating at the Arbor Day ceremony about the value of trees.
Yeah, and it's not a huge island, but sure is boring right now. I'm going to share my screen really quick. You guys let me know when you can see it. Do you see anything?
Okay.
Yeah. See it.
So you see we have some plantings. If you can see my cursor, the little hand, we've done some plantings down here, and this picture is from 2016. So these have actually grown significantly down at the bottom of the driveway, but we don't have anything in this island right here. It's just grass. And so every time I walk in there, I think, that sure is boring. It would be nice to see something there. That would be a great Arbor Day location. And,
Sure.
This is a spot where Public Works could actually help us by removing some of this really bad soil. And we could probably bring in a little bit better soil and give this tree a chance. But I would also ask, like, if you guys have any particular species in mind for this spot. It's super hot. It would probably only get watered once a week in the summer, and it has to be able to compete, in this kind of island environment, which really is not going to get a whole lot of rain because it's curbed.
What's the size of that circle?
It's probably, I'm guessing, but I would say it's probably 6 by about 16. It's a lot bigger than our normal tree islands and parking lots.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a bit of a planting trees in the middle of roads dummy, but like I'm wondering about the roots. Like, how do you find a tree that you tree people? Like, how are there trees that won't have surface roots that won't destroy that road?
There are certain trees that are better for sites like that. I mean, it's not ideal for a tree, but they can find a way.
Without breaking the road up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Casey, are there any, I'm just channeling Doug Tellamy here, are there any oaks that would be able to withstand those conditions?
I'd have to like look a little bit more into it. Like off the top of my head, I wouldn't necessarily be able to tell you definitively.
Yeah.
But I can look at some options.
Yeah, and in this particular situation, we really need a tree that grows up
Mm-hmm.
and not out into the roadway, because we don't want to impact visibility, right? People, that's already kind of a tricky
Yeah.
corner in terms of seeing people coming and going. So we would really be looking for something that has that, tall, sort of more vase-like
Mm-hmm.
shape.
Like a black gum? Is that no?
That would work. I
No,
was
no,
thinking
but,
swamp white oak.
Swamp white oak?
Yeah, if you saw that the 9/11 memorial, most of those oak trees are actually swamp white oaks, which is pretty hard. I mean, yeah, in a pretty tough environment, so that might work. And it's a real pretty tree as well.
Princeton elm has a good base shape.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a number of options. That's, we could consider.
I'd like to, let's see, we're definitely going to meet in October, but I'd really like to try to resolve this spot before our next meeting. Would you guys be willing to let maybe Greg and Casey come up with some examples, and then we can send it around via email, and I can get some estimates so that at our next meeting, we can just authorize it. Maybe we could handle some of the discussion via email about which species to choose for Arbor Day in this particular location. And then we can vote on it at the next meeting. Does that work for you guys? Which still puts us ahead of Arbor Day proclamation. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Sounds like a plan.
Okay, and so Greg and Casey, if you guys could visit the site and just take a look at it, and then send me some examples and just copy each other on that email chain, I'd appreciate it.
Sure.
All right, so real quickly, just to summarize, I'm going to keep talking about the Nash Street parking strip. Make sure there's no underground utilities that are in the way. Talk to the property owners and see if we can't find a way to partner with that site being our main planting site for trees this year. Plus the Arbor Day tree at Gold Park. Plus, I'll get estimates for the Hillsborough Heights pollinator garden, which is mostly going to be pretty low maintenance shrubs and perennials, just because we don't have like a huge set of volunteers there. So we're probably talking about some Calicarpa, y'all. It's just such an easygoing plant. And then the final one, I'll reach out to Mount Bright about future plantings, and then if there is additional funding, we can look at some of the sites on Riverwalk. Sound good?
Good.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Yeah, and I don't need a formal motion on that because we're gonna come back for the final motion in October.
Did we work out?
Okay, thanks, Steph.
I'm sorry, was someone saying
All
something?
right, I think we have 6B, which is the invasives walk.
Hold on 1 second. Linda, were you saying something?
I was asking, did we have an Arbor Day, like, do we choose a day? Like, what, do we have a deadline for this? We don't have a deadline, right?
Yeah, we're gonna need to choose an Arbor Day, but I haven't gotten there yet. And that is something that I will probably circulate as a doodle poll.
Here's a banner and hats.
Yeah. I think Andrea said we can move on. Actually, if we could just go down the list. I'm not hearing
Do
Andrea.
we want to do?
Go ahead. I think Andrea is cutting out for a second, you guys, so I'm just gonna jump in and say, any updates on the video planting for Leave the Leaves, Casey?
I'm gonna do it soon.
Okay. Great, thank you. How about ivy removal, Tim?
Yeah, last week, Cheryl Sedgrove, came out to, and Liz, this happened so quickly, it was over with before we knew it, but she asked me when we were going to go out next, that is the ivy removal crew. So Francis at the last minute said, yeah, I can do Wednesday. So it was Tuesday night and Cheryl said, sure, I can make it. So last Wednesday, we started removing ivy from a couple of cedars at Town Hall and right at the corner of Churton and Orange, I guess. And Cheryl came out, there was a news release, and by Friday, somebody from a student from the DTH was contacting me to do an interview about it. So there is, I saw it last night, the article. It's very, very nice, even though there are a couple of errors in it. I mean, she says something about ivy dripping from the roots of trees. I don't know where she got that, but anyway, and I'll be happy to share the link, but she asked about volunteers, and I explained to her that currently with COVID, we were being a little cautious about that. But and I don't know that UNC students would really be likely to come all the way up here to do that. But it just something to think about if we ever decide to bring in volunteers, is, you know, we might do an outreach to UNC. I did give her a link to the library's volunteer day that seemed more practical. That is the Chapel Hill Public Library. But anyway, I can send out the link if you want, or you just go to the DTH site and you'll see it in today. I think it's today or yesterday's paper. Stephanie, I have a question for you. Any progress on that little yard sign that we were thinking about?
It's been ordered.
Okay, great.
I'll get it to you as soon as it comes in. So probably in the next week or so.
Okay.
So Tim, I'm sorry, I didn't understand what paper it's going to be in.
So it's in the UNC student newspaper. It's called the Daily Tar Heel.
Oh, okay.
There is a paper version that you can find, you know, like Weaver Street carries it, but it's also very easy to access online.
Have you had an article already in the News of Orange?
We did when the first news release came out.
Okay.
Yeah, so the Ivy Project has a video on the town website. It has social media posts. It has a News of Orange article. Now it has a second social media post, and that's what got the students at UNC interested to write an article. So I do think we're getting some great publicity thanks to you guys for participating in all of those interviews. And we've got some great pictures now of you doing your work. And pretty soon we'll have a sign. So thank you so much. And thanks for the work you're doing in the Old Town Cemetery too. And I think that Andrea's back now. So.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Are we going to do any discussion on the invasive walk?
Yeah, if we could do that after the election. We'll do that as item 6E.
Okay. Election of officers, and I'm not sure when my term is up, but I'm ready to step aside. And I will retire at the end of my term this year, because I think I've been on the tree board since 2004.
Wow.
It's time for someone else to take the helm.
So for you guys that may not remember, the way annual elections work is this is a casual board, right? You just need to talk amongst yourselves for a minute and then make a nomination and vote on it. The chair position is 1 year. The vice chair is also 1 year. And the vice chair steps in to chair the meetings whenever the chairperson is not available.
And it's an easy job. Stephanie does the work.
Can we nominate people right now?
Yes.
Casey, don't shoot me, but I nominate Casey.
So Casey, would you be interested in chairing?
It's just that I just need to learn Andrea's so good at the lingo. That's the only piece that that's all it is. Yeah, sure.
You have to memorize, what is it, the bar rules of, there's some.
Robert's
Some little-
Rules of Order.
Yes, thank you. Robert's Rules of Orders, yeah.
I'll be here to help you out. It's not so hard.
Yeah.
But nobody really calls you to account if you forget something.
Sure.
I think Casey would be a good one.
You guys.
Thank you, Casey. I agree.
Yeah, I think so, for sure.
Okay, so we're gonna vote on that in a minute. Do we have a nomination for vice chair for the year?
I'm
I would
going
like
to
to
nominate him for vice chair,
Hmm.
if he will accept.
I'll accept, but if there are other nominations, I will gladly concede or whatever.
All right, so we have two
Any
nominations,
other-
two willing people.
Okay, we have two nominations. We have Casey Collins as chair of the tree board for the next year and Tim Logue as vice chair. Any other nominations, any other discussion?
Who is the vice chair at the moment?
Okay,
Francis.
shall we,
You should just,
shall we, vote?
She left. Okay.
Or shall we accept by consensus?
I'm sorry, do we need a motion and a second for this vote?
Okay, who makes a motion that we nominate these two?
Okay, I would like to move that we elect Casey Collins as our new chair for the year and Tim Logue as our vice chair.
So we have a motion by Sharon Billings. Is there a second?
A second.
Liz Waters seconded. Any more discussion?
No.
All in favor, aye.
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 Aye. All opposed, any opposed? Thank you for your vote. We now have a new chair and a new vice chair.
Thank you, guys.
Congratulations, you two. So starting in October, Casey will chair the tree board and Tim will be vice chair. Any other discussion items except for the invasives walk?
Yeah, so you guys saw an email go around with a summary, I think that Sharon put together, which was really great. Thank you for doing that. I'm so sorry I couldn't attend that meeting. I was glad that town staff was able to attend. That's staff from the Stormwater Division. They will certainly be partnering with us on any invasive removal plans. But I wondered, I know we're running a little late today, but if you could just give maybe a short sort of summary of your walk, and then if any of you have thought about next steps in this project, maybe share those today.
I will say
Want me to
geographically, we didn't get very.
Okay, go ahead, Tim.
Oh, I was just going to say that we limited our walk pretty much to the bridge at Weaver Street, and then we walked probably down to the footbridge over the creek. And we spent a lot of time on the bridge because the Atlantis and Privet are so visible there. And I do think as far as making
I'm winding down. We'll see.
we talked about
Okay.
prioritizing, what species and what areas. And I think
You'll keep trying to change socks.
No, that's
Sorry,
fine.
Greg, you're unmuted, my friend.
Sorry.
anyway, so we talked about what areas of the walk and what species should be our priorities. And I think Sharon pretty much explained the species. And then as far as the areas go, I don't know that we officially or explicitly landed on things, but I think there seemed to be a consensus that the bridge, there were a lot of invasives right under the bridge, and that might be a good place to start. I also wanted to add one thing about the stiltgrass that didn't get into the summary. Johnny did have herbicide recommendations for all of the bad actors, but he did say that with the stiltgrass, mowing it, trimming it back further from the path will at the very least keep it from reseeding. And he made a couple of interesting points about other vegetation. He said, stiltgrass is an annual. So if there are perennials like a bottle brush grass that's growing with it, if you scalp that or cut it back, the perennials are going to come back. Of course, the seed, depending on the stiltgrass, but it's not going to kill the perennials there. And for herbicidal treatment, he also said, besides just hitting the stiltgrass directly, I know that's a whole issue that we have to talk about, but sometimes you can just spray the tops of it and it won't affect the other vegetation around. But that's probably getting too deep into the weeds. I'll let the others talk who were in attendance.
I think the thing you said about the stiltgrass, which was interesting, was that because it's so aggressive and like everywhere, that even if we took our little section that we are responsible for and eradicated all the stiltgrass, you could still have a lot of seed come from like further up the river at any point from a flood. So it didn't sound like, in terms of economy of effort, that it was realistic to get rid of the stiltgrass. He did say like our time and energy would probably be better spent getting rid of the privet and the trees. And so he gave us some like good tips on how to like efficiently handle those invasives, which seemed achievable. He also said if you did do a little test patch of like removing some stiltgrass to replace it, like he even said like use like plugs of river oats. Like river oats are good competition for the stiltgrass. And so you could try a little test patch and see if you did kind of hand remove or whatever, spray the stiltgrass in a section, you could like do the plugs and see what that looks like. But long term, even if you sort of kept your section clean, the river's going to do what it's going to do, and it could flood and bring seed at any point.
I thought it was very encouraging that the two people that came from the stormwater management office, they seemed to be very eager to help with any kind of management of the invasives, and that particularly I think they had money probably, and they also have a lot of contacts where they could get people to help cut out the plants, and then we'd have to make a decision whether to use the herbicides, to completely try to get rid of them. But they would be, I think, a big help, and could maybe just start a project where we take a certain space, say, I don't know, 20 feet, and try to manage that, and then keep moving down with volunteer groups like the Boy Scouts or something.
One thing Johnny did say, I've been studying invasives for a while, and this was a new to me, but you can mechanically remove a lot of shrubs with a weed wrench and that kind of thing without using herbicides. But he did say that when you do that, you disturb the soil and potentially create openings for new invasives. So that's just, and so one of the advantages of the cut and paint method, that is cutting the stem of the shrub as close to the ground as possible and painting it with just a little herbicide, is, in addition to efficiency, it doesn't sprout back, it doesn't disturb the soil. So that was new to me. And he did, by the way, I'm going to see if I can get extra copies of this, but he gave me an updated, this is the latest edition of the U.S. Forest Service's management guide for invasive plants in southern forests. And I would, can I just read the first 3 sentences? Because it's really inspiring to me. It says, only recently has the extent of invasive plant occupation in the southern US and elsewhere in the world been realized. Coming rather quickly in the past 10 to 50 years, the extent and spread of non-native plant species has taken many people by surprise, and it's still not comprehended by most citizens and policymakers. One thing is starkly apparent, however: forest, preserve, and right-of-way managers and landowners need to act fast to stop the rapid encroachment of non-native invasive plants, eradicate infestations, and restore native communities. So anyway, pretty strong language, but and also for those of you who are interested, Johnny did bring multiple copies of the Botanical Gardens pamphlet on removing native invasive plants, and I'm happy to get those to you somehow.
And I'll just jump in here to say, you know, we don't have staff, Town of Hillsborough staff people that can work on invasive removal. Like, we just don't have that capacity.
Right.
So any invasive removal program either has to be funded by the town, stormwater and public space funds, like meaning we put in a budget request, like our like we did for the reforestation project. If that budget request goes through, funds become available in the next fiscal year, then we can hire people to do the work. Right. So that's one option. The second option is to use volunteers. That gets very tricky when you're talking about herbicide application. And I don't know how comfortable I am with it when it comes to the herbicide application, because those herbicides, many of them are dangerous if not applied correctly. And it just becomes, on a volunteer workday, it becomes very difficult to make sure that that application process is following all of the the guidance. And so what I would suggest is, as Sharon was explaining, finding a small area, not small, but finding a targeted area to start. We could probably tap into have a volunteer workday sometime soon to do the cutting that you're talking about. And then the application of the herbicide should either be done by a tree board member or a contractor, that would be brought in. And so if that's something you guys are interested in doing, we've never had an invasive species removal program for the town before. This is new territory, but I think it's important territory, but we need to be sort of focused on sort of one spot. And of course, tree board is already working on ivy removal. So I don't know how much capacity you guys have. But that is, I just need you to be realistic about what we can take on, and, maybe talk about like where you would want to start or how you would want to manage that if we had sort of a pilot program. I usually have 1 or 2 Eagle Scouts a year and 1 or 2 Boy Scout troops and Girl Scout troops a year that are looking for projects, but they tend to be, the Eagle Scout projects tend to be a little bit more in depth. The Girl Scout and Boy Scout troops are really not doing like skilled labor and work generally because it's younger kids. So they do a lot of litter removal, they do some weeding, mulching.
Well, Stephanie, go ahead. No.
I was gonna say what Johnny explained for at least the privet removal was like somebody has a chainsaw, and then he said probably that same person has a spray bottle with the herbicide, and so they're cutting and spraying. Like one person is doing both of those things. So really what you need is labor to haul the cut privet like further out, like up the river, inland, and making brush piles. So
we've done this at the library a number of times. We had 25 students from Carborough High come out, and all they did was haul brush. And we never asked them to apply herbicide. And Casey's absolutely right. You can't, the cut and paint thing, the challenge is keeping up with your cuts. I mean, even if I'm down and you usually can do most of this with loppers. I mean, up to, 1.5-inch caliper privet, say, but you cut 3 at a time and you're in, you're in a jungle of, leaves and stuff. And that's about as many you can cut before you have to apply the herbicide, because you'll lose track of where you are. So if you have, even 2 people cutting and you're painting, it can be hard to keep up with, where those stumps are. So I mean, I think in terms of numbers of volunteer, I could see 25 students pulling still grass, but with the privet, I think the opportunity or the need would probably be with the hauling. And Johnny did say, and this is something we've done at the library, is you can pile up these shrubs, these invasive plants, and make wildlife habitat. Right, not too far from where you're cutting. I know you don't want to, you don't want it to look messy, but it's not like we have to haul it far away.
Well, and
Well,
you also-
again, if you were to select an area, we could probably put a call out to some of the groups I work with to see if they have time and energy. I will tell you, it's a lot harder to do volunteer work days during COVID, especially right now during the Delta surge.
Mhm.
We are really trying to stay away from any type of large group gatherings, even in outdoor environments.
Yeah.
And so, this may be a project that just needs to sort of wait until we can have a safe work day, or hire people to come in that are going to be following safety protocols. And that's just the fact of the matter. But the first thing would be to identify an area to start.
Yeah. Like you're coming into not a good time to pull the privet up anyway, because it's going to have like ripe fruit soon. So
Yeah.
like,
Well, yeah, I mean, I think if you act on it right now, I've been doing it at Occoneechee Speedway with Bill Crowther's permission. This is a good time to do it, and it's and actually you can cut because I do. I mean, I've told Stephanie this, but I do have an herbicide license with the town, which I was required to have when I worked for the town of Chapel Hill. It expires at the end of this year, and so I'm not sure what happens after that. But I think one area that would be really high impact would be that boardwalk, right east, I guess, of the bridge of Weaver Street. I mean, it's just, you're going through a privet forest, and you couldn't ask for anything closer to the walk if one of your goals is sort of educating the public about what we're doing, and also high traffic area. But I'm open to other suggestions for where to start.
Stephanie, do we have enough funds for a sign like the one we did, the Ivy? Since there's so many people who walk by there, it'd be good education to have a sign showing what's going on and identifying.
You mean if there was a
invasives.
work day?
Yeah. So whenever, we were working, then people would know why, what's going on.
Yeah, if we have work days, I'm sure we can get a sign. My concern is first figuring out what this workday scenario looks like, because there's a lot to consider.
Yeah.
First of all, COVID and the pandemic really mean we can't have big groups working right now.
Yeah, and I don't think we need to. Yeah.
So if what you're talking about is having a tree board member like Tim cut and paint a section of privet along the Riverwalk, that's something we could probably move forward with fairly quickly, although I really need to check with my safety officer about chainsaw use. That is not something we've allowed in the past.
And I don't need a chainsaw. I have loppers and a pruning
Okay.
saw. I don't even like mechanical, I've got I don't need a chainsaw.
Okay, so loppers and painting, if this board were to approve Tim, who's certified, to start on an area of the low boardwalk with some privet removal, then I think that is something we could move forward with fairly quickly on Tim's schedule. And, you know, then it can be just something we tackle over time. Now, once COVID hopefully subsides and there's an opportunity for larger work days again, we can bring in bigger groups and advertise, you know, bigger work days. But I would suggest that we wait until after, you know, until it's safe for people to be working in close proximity again.
Hey, Stephanie, I've got to check out of our hotel like in a few minutes, so I'm gonna have to sign off. But I did want to thank Andrea for all her years of service, and she did just phenomenal job.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Kudos.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. I
Well, take care.
appreciate it.
Absolutely. We'll see you next month.
See you, Greg.
All right. Bye, Tim. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Casey.
Bye,
Bye, Liz.
Greg.
Bye-bye.
Are you guys okay with me just visiting the River Walk Low Boardwalk section with Tim, and maybe us picking a spot to start, and then we'll report back to you on any progress over the next couple months? Does that work for you?
Mhm.
Okay, Tim?
Yeah.
Also, Stephanie,
good
I'd
to
like
me.
for us to proceed in the budget, whenever that's appropriate, to start forming, I don't know what would be, you know, something the town would sponsor, because I think, you know, everybody is becoming, like Tim said with that article, we really need to be aware of invasives. And so anyway, what would the timing be for that before
Do
the
you
next
mean,
budget?
I'm sorry, Liz, do you mean putting money in the budget to hire contractors to do invasive species removal?
Well, you said that there's no one in, I didn't know how you word it, that there's not a, there's not a budgeted area for people to work on invasive species or whatever. So could you reword that? I'm sorry.
We don't have staff time. We don't have capacity in our current staff to do invasive species removal. If we're gonna remove invasive species, we have to hire contractors. If we want to hire contractors, we need to, or use volunteers. But if we want to hire someone to do it, we need to put in a budget request for money for an invasive species program, removal program, where there would be dedicated funds each year to hire a contractor to come in and work in you know, selected areas.
And like, you know, like Tim said, for now, volunteers, because this is a process. And then that would be something to look at in the future.
We're not going to neglect the ivy, Stephanie, I promise you. In fact, there's some ivy on the Riverwalk that needs wrangling.
Well, I can certainly get some estimates from contractors, grounds maintenance contractors, about what it would cost to do some privet and tree of heaven eradication. I think I have to agree with Casey and Tim on the stilt grass at this point. I don't think it is economical to try to eradicate the stilt grass.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the ailanthus, because I think aesthetically, well, and ecologically, I mean, the privet is just so noticeable. And I think a lot of people recognize it as an invasive, whereas ailanthus, I think a lot, you know, it's not really on most people's radar, but it's so insidious in the number of, you know, it's 300,000 seeds per tree. I read somewhere that you should concentrate on the females that are setting seeds. I can't just, I mean, I've not tried to distinguish the two, but I think that should be fairly high on our list too. And maybe when we meet down there, we could at least look at them.
Okay. Sounds good.
My calendar's wide open,
Any
Stephanie.
other
So just give me a time and we'll do it.
Any other discussion? Shall we move on? No garden club report.
Andrea, are you still there?
The city subcommittee. I'm still here.
Okay, you cut out a little bit.
Right.
Can you repeat what you just said?
Any more discussion about the invasives? If not, we'll go on to updates. No garden club update that I know of. B City Subcommittee.
I haven't received any updates from Sarah recently.
Staff
Yeah, I just have-
reports.
Just a couple of tree removals to let you guys know about the Old Town Cemetery, north property line. There was a bunch of invasives growing on our property. Tim and others have been working on the English ivy, but there's also a lot of privet back there, grapevine, all kinds of stuff. So we are right now clearing that property line. And also there was a dead pine tree on Barracks Road in the right of way that we removed. It was dead, had no branch. It was like completely dead. So that one came out too. And those are the only removals that we've had since last month.
Any other item for discussion? Then is there a motion that we adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
A second.
Okay, we have a second from Sharon. Motion by Tim. All in favor of adjourning this meeting, say aye.
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 Any opposition? Then we are adjourned till October. Thank you all.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you.
Aye.